in general. So to start things up, and I know it's been a lot of information today. To start things up, we're going to put out a poll, and Willem, if you'll bring it up. What we're trying to get is a feeling of what kinds of topics people are most interested in.
Yeah, so we're using a little bit of a different system.
Correct.
Yeah, so I posted a link in the chat. If everybody wants to go follow that link, you should be able to vote. You'll see a list of data applications, and you're welcome to pick them, from first to later. Oops, I sent it to the waiting room. Let's try that again. There we go. It was because I sent it to people in the waiting room, and there's nobody in the waiting room. So now you should see a link. Feel free to go and choose, I guess, as many of those as you want in your order of preference from first to nth. Let's see.
I only see select an option. Oh, I see. If you click
so
on the
provide you a drop-down option, pick your favorite, pick your second favorite, and you don't have to do them all. You do as many as you feel are important to you.
So what we're trying to do is get a sort of a weighted indication of levels of interest. And so we selected some: origin, on-time performance, passenger boardings to lightings by stop, real-time passenger loads, running times, actual layover times, excessive delay, fare evasion, origin destination matrices, just to get a bit of an indication of what where people's highest levels of interest are. So we'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll look at the results, and that'll help us get started in the discussion. We still have 30 people. It's good. So Willem's monitoring this.
Yep. There have been 18 responses so far.
We do have some U of T folks in the room, and they probably are not voting.
Well, I can share them for now, and they'll adjust as people continue to submit if you'd like.
Oh, that's like voting on the East Coast versus the West Coast.
Yeah,
West
exactly.
Coast,
yeah.
The West Coast people get to see what the East Coast said. If they could adjust their vote. Go ahead.
Right.
So is it? So
I'll share my screen in just a second here.
Oh, I see. Okay, you share your screen.
Go.
Aha. Okay. Oh, passenger boardings, real time. I thought I might have biased the question by the way I set it up, but obviously did not. Very interesting. Okay, so clearly the just the normal use of APCs is the top of the list. And I guess because of COVID, the real-time passenger loads have also become probably more important than they had been. On-time performance, origin destination matrices, I guess, is a tie with running times and excessive delay for TSB priority treatment, which is interesting because origin destination matrices, of course, are the mantra of academics. But I hadn't sensed quite as much interest among transit agencies. Okay, so you're going to capture that, right, Willem?
Yep, sure am.
Okay, so I guess the question is, we want an open discussion of any reactions to that or to what you see as applications. And I know it varies a lot depending on where you stand in terms of the development of analytics within your own organization. For those who've had APCs for a long time and have set up processes for sanitizing, as Howard said earlier, ensuring quality assurance, that may be old hat, but it's, I guess, also an issue of where people see the use of the applications. So if you, since we're not, well, we're still 30 people, but if you want to, I want to just open up the floor for anybody who's got experience or is thinking about how to go further, just to with where we go from this. So
would you like people to use the raise hand tool?
Yeah, I think it's best to use the raise hand tool, which is under reactions.
Be under your reactions, yeah.
And then, but you'll have to help me monitor because I can't see the whole.
For sure, we'll keep an eye on it.
Scroll it all at the same time. Yes, people thinking about their comments. We can start with a more specific. Anybody feel that boardings and alightings is well understood already and is well used, or is there still areas related to boardings and alightings that need to further examination?
Can I jump in, Brendan? Steve
Sure,
Farber
Steve.
here.
Yes,
Hi.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I've been popping in and out all day. I've just had I was really like overbooked today, so I apologize. I wish I could have been here for more earlier. But I was wondering why this question is posed just as stop level boardings and alightings, rather than maybe a more generalized and more difficult to obtain measure of like complete path taken by riders. So rather than building a measure of just how many, anyways, I think the question was clear.
Yeah, well, I guess the distinction I was making was between boardings and alightings, which is sort of the typical APC data, as opposed to origin destination matrices, which gives you complete paths.
Oh, okay. In my mind, OD matrices are just like the volume of trips from origins to destinations, but not the paths necessarily. So that was my.
It could be either.
Yeah.
It could be either.
Okay.
Most of the analytics I've seen from the symposia, there's a lot of effort in trying to do an inference engine that gives you the destination, but then they use the path for all sorts of things afterwards in terms of disruptions and crowding and so forth.
Right.
But I saw somebody had a hand up. Blair, no, was it you?
Yeah, it was. And I think on the same vein, that's why I actually see the ODs as actually probably more important for us than the on-off stuff. Maybe again, because we've had APCs for a while and are getting a lot of good information on at stop level right now. But ODs, we haven't done an OD survey since the early 2000s, partially because it's a lot of work to do them manually. And right now, in what ways can we do them using other tools or automated to help us? And our fare cards don't really help because it's not a tap off system. So we can see when they get on, but not off. And there's two elements to that. One is, again, the paths, where are people going and where they're doing. And one of the earlier parts when we did our network redesign was actually looking at what those key places people were coming and going to, which helps us to analyze our network and determine, is our network actually serving people in their path, because you really want to shorten their path as much as possible, because that's going to speed up their trips. And hopefully you can, by identifying, and we identifying that not only are ODs for transit, which is obviously the key for us, but also what are the ODs for people who aren't using transit? And if we got a lot of people going between certain areas, can we actually provide them with a transit trip that will allow them to switch from the automobile or other modes?
Yeah, no, those are excellent. And just a couple quick comments. Steve, you're right. My semantics of using OD matrices is not what I meant. It's the OD paths. And Blair, I totally agree with what you're saying in terms of identifying generators, trying to identify transfer points, shorten the paths, and desired OD. I should point out that some of the agencies, the sort of cutting edge agencies that have worked with some of the academics in this symposia collective, that's a lot of what the academics developed, and there have been some companies have come out of that develop tools, but a couple places have actually managed to use OD smart card data even with only tap on by using these inference engines to actually have complete patterns. So it's a growing field, and I think it'll be more widespread available in the future. Somebody else, Anthony, is that you got a hand up? I think
Anthony. Yep.
Yep.
Hi. I mean, I'm circling back to the topic of boardings and kind of stop level data.
Okay.
I do feel like there's an opportunity across different agencies to kind of share best practices in regards to, particularly the sanitization process. For example, at GoTransit, we have a process that cleans the data. Two key issues are one, when the driver gets on and off the bus, either opening a cargo bay or assisting with the bike rack, we have a standard process to delete one boarding. And then also with things like the end of trip, if a vehicle skips the last stop because there's no one on board, often the trip is not recorded because it was never completed in the system. And so we have to go back and have an inference process to kind of infill the average from historic data. But those are just two examples, but there's a whole system of cleaning. And it would be useful. I mean, maybe there is also different practices depending on what software you use, but just having a list of, what softwares different agencies use, and maybe creating like a wiki or some sort of place people could share lessons learned.
That's an excellent point. In fact, we'll touch base about that in the past, but it's fine to bring it up now. I totally agree. I mean, in that paper I mentioned that I wrote 5 years ago, this was a key difficulty for everybody. And everybody, there's no standard software, and the vendors themselves have not developed necessarily good tools for this. So everybody's sort of done their own thing in parallel. I once asked Denver RTD staff that have been in this game for a long time if they had exactly sort of a checklist that I could share with people. He says, no, it's 40 or 50 steps involved in our checking the data to clean it up. Yeah. So no, there's no, but it's a really interesting thought to have some sort of wiki or forum where people at least, we could actually try to narrow down to a set of checklist of things to check for.
Yeah. Well, and maybe one simple example would be something like a GitHub page where transit agencies could upload some of the code they use, like the SQL queries. We've got, even between our staff, someone in one division doesn't always know what the other person's doing. And so having, just an archive of open source scripts that people are running, I'd be happy to share things. It's not like we're secretive about the tools that we use. So that's just one idea.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I meant, I'm going to send you afterwards, but I might as well mention it here. There actually is right now, and it's not directly related to that, but it sort of reminds me, a TCRP project G18 that I'm on the panel for, that is actually developing standardized, I guess, protocols, specification data management for sharing ITS data and applications people have developed with their ITS data. So it's not quite the same as what you're saying, but it's something we'll definitely share as it progresses. I see Tony's got his hand up. Yeah, Tony, you've got your hand up.
Yep. So I just made a comment, I guess, in terms of here at Burlington Transit, we did take the smart card data to create an OD to the root level. So it was useful at our network design last year, also in 2018. And especially we had a new bus bay facility at south side of Burlington GO Station. So it was helpful in laying out which bus route goes where because we know the transfer patterns.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that.
And then another great thing is that I guess it levels the playing field between planners and drivers. So you can close the gap between what you can see at the desk and what drivers see on the field. So it's interesting to fact check the data while talking to driver. Hey, is it true that a lot of people transfer from Route 1 to the Route 80 at this location? And they've been pretty good at it. So,
Interesting. Good. Those are good. Any other hands up?
I have a question if you want, Brennan.
Sure, go ahead.
Or a question or a comment. I was a little bit curious if people's responses to this, if it's of most interest because there's lots to be done, or if it's most interest because people find it the most useful in their existing applications. And maybe you have some insight into that, whether people like passenger boarding to lightings because it's useful, or because they would like to learn more about what you can do with that kind of thing.
I don't know. I leave it open. The way I phrased I try to keep the question short, and by doing so, I sort of squish together people's levels of interest or areas people want to see further development in. But I don't know. Is that what does anybody have a perception about that or reaction?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just looking at the questions, I just wonder whether the answers are a function, well, obviously of who's at the table here, but in terms of immediacy of need. So operational data for run as directed or bridging vehicles now today in the next hour versus scheduling for the next day versus planning for the longer term. And maybe these rankings get reordered depending on who's asking the question. And the other comment on ODs, I'm aware of, I think one US agency on an APTA call who was using cell phone data to infer pathways and especially commuting. So when they see a regular reoccurrence of the same route, and to use that as part of their service design. I don't know how realistic that is to be done in Canada, given privacy laws and so on, but I'm aware that on a recent, I think this was earlier this summer, I heard about that from, I think, a West Coast US agency.
Well, there are also companies, commercial companies like Straightlight that do that and give you desired paths of people, but all modes combined. That's why I was intrigued this morning about the question I asked, because identifying or picking out specifically transit data is a little bit more tricky in that respect. Amber, I see you there. You have a reaction or?
Yes, no, I just wanted to comment on the second priority area, which is the real-time passenger loads.
Okay.
I know, I know there's a great deal of interest in reporting in real-time crowding levels on routes, but there has been a lot of interest in academic circles also on person-based TSP, providing TSP based on passenger loads or bus loads. And that's something in the past, of course, with APC data is not available in real time, was not really feasible. But if AVL data or APC data becomes available now in real time, that's something I think would be quite interesting development. I think both in academia as well as I think in real life would be very beneficial to provide higher priority for more crowded buses.
it's controversial. So I think we've talked about, because I did a lot of work on TSP and that has come up many times, but it tends to be brought up by traffic engineers that want to minimize how many times priority is called on the bus, is given to the bus. That upsets their coordination. So I've never been a big fan, and you're right, it has been limited physically because of the way the architectures of these systems had been set up in the past. But it sure is opening the door now if you do have real-time APC data. It's, there's obvious problems that the bus may not be crowded and then coming up to a very busy transfer point. And so, do you not give it priority because of that? But the systems for giving priority can get more and more sophisticated. So this certainly is an issue to be discussed. Anthony, I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks. I just, jumping off that last comment, I recently learned, and I'm exploring this idea of TSP and signal priority, that Viva's priority sort of is based on delay. So if the bus is on time or even early, there's no need to have the signal triggered. And if you're behind, then it'll kind of catch up. So it was just, for me, I mean, I'm not an engineer or data scientist, like in the back end of that stuff. The bus has the ability to tell the system that it's behind and link it to the schedule and all that. So I was intrigued by that. And the other, I guess, just general comment was, I think we need to have better, all these different systems, like the TTC has that web map and GRT has their own data server. If we just enabled the public to see that data, like the comment earlier about TTC, I really think advocacy or pushing, even if it was in sort of like a data trust of some sort, like we shared the accesses just within a restricted number of users, like if GRT could see ours and we could see theirs. I heard this idea of a data trust, which is kind of a step between an open data and a fully restricted data set. So maybe that's another role your team could play.
That's very interesting, because open data is, everybody's in favor of it, but it's a lot more challenging to figure out what to do with it.
The one big, just two other quick comments. I'm sorry to steal time, but on the crowding, the real-time information, our CEO's position was he didn't feel comfortable sharing data if it wasn't accurate 100% of the time. There was maybe 99% is okay, but he really was risk averse, and the senior management actually stopped. We still have been exploring it, but it's just, there's so many caveats to the data, it made it a little unreliable. We did test using directly having the INET CAD AVL system push data to our enterprise GIS server using I don't know what the process is, but it pulled it in and we had a live map that showed exactly every bus and how many people were on it. So it's like we tested it, it's possible, but it just wasn't quite good enough for the prime time. So I just wanted to share that.
That's very interesting. This morning's session, both of them, Charles and Logan, said that was a big issue. That was a huge issue of convincing people and organizationally the senior management. But that suggests that sometimes the problem is not technical, it's more organizational, and it's something maybe to think about, that to explore what the real risk is of providing data that's, I don't quite understand, because, with those little pins, it's not you're not the difference between 2 pins and 3 pins is, it's not 2 or 3 people. And so I have a little trouble understanding that, but it's clearly an issue for many people.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. Yeah. Any others? There's topics, questions. While I'm waiting, I should mention, Anthony, conditional priority is really mostly the norm everywhere for TSP. A few places like TTC do have unconditional priority, but it's increasingly rare. And that's fine. That's if it, it's TSP is a process of coming up with a compromise between the objectives of transit folks and the traffic engineers who have different objectives. And it's trying to come to a system that both are mutually happy with. Blair, you might comment on that. You've got TSP, and I think it's conditional, right?
Yes, we started when we first put it in because we didn't have our AVL system in for the first year or two. It was actually unconditional. We did some trials to compare what would happen, but the conditional is, I think, necessary and better. It makes your traffic guys much more happy with you than thinking that we're just going to go run rampant over their systems. The main challenge is how do you get it beyond just straight conditional, where because if I get a bus that's coming in two different directions that are both behind, which one should get the priority first? Because if the first one getting there gets it, they may actually not need it as much as the one, they may be 4 minutes behind, the guy would be coming the other way is 10 minutes behind, and they're the guys who really need it. And doing some of that is a bit of a challenge, and I haven't seen, and when you have to recycle back to get everything on the signals back in place, I've seen some challenges with that next level of work.
That's a good one. We'll make a note of sort of reviewing more sophisticated TSP strategies. That might be of use to, well, everybody, especially if there is some movement towards a more common approach in the region. Anybody else have comments like about the origin destination, versus on time? Nobody's mentioned really on time performance yet either. I assume that's pretty important to folks.
Apparently pretty important to passengers, so.
I would say that reliability measures are potentially more important than, well, I guess how likely is my bus to be on time on an average? Like, customers tend to plan for the worst case scenario. So, it's nice to know it was late 2 days, but I guess it's just kind of balancing that. How do you message what OTP is to a customer and communicate? For example, GO trains had a measure of on-time performance. They were often late. So now we've introduced a slightly longer dwell time at certain stations to have that catch up built into the system. But that means everyone's slower all the time. So do you want reliability or do you want speed? And it's often a trade-off. You could have higher risk of being late, but make the train 5 minutes faster every single day. So just a thought.
Yeah,
And I think that reliability is critical in many ways. That's actually how our TDRS system that Howard described, a lot of the origins was the work that we did with Bruce Hillinger from UW, and a lot of it was on the reliability, because if one day your bus was going to be 5 minutes early, but the next day was going to be 5 minutes late, you're having to end up taking the bus before that to make sure that you're not late. And if you don't know that unreliability is probably even a bigger factor. But I think if you get the reliability on, then you're on time sort of going to follow with that, because you'll adjust your schedules to make that. So
that's I agree, and I like the link to the customer's experience, as I mentioned before. I know some academics have done some thinking about a different metric that might be excessive wait time for the passengers as opposed to just pure on-time performance. I'm not quite sure I understand the analytics of the difference of how it would be measured, but it gets back more to the customer experience, which would be useful. Any other thoughts or comments, reactions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll mention a little bit. Reliability is kind of my wheelhouse a little bit, and that's what I focused on in Calgary. And I remember all this talk about knowing when your bus is coming reminded me of a study or a survey they did at the University of Calgary, looking at what happens if your app showed you error bars on your arrival. I realize that's a very kind of convoluted way, but to say the bus is scheduled to arrive here plus or minus 2 minutes or plus or minus whatever, and would that 90% confidence interval or whatever make sense to people, and would people use it to schedule their trips better? And the results were mixed. I think there was a little bias in the people they surveyed. They probably surveyed more academics than the average amount of academics that are out in the world. But there was, I think this goes back to the open data question about what to show and what to share, is that there's a lot of complexity and nuance, and you can't just share the information with all these caveats without explaining them, or at least giving people an understanding that it's a messy system and there's nothing perfect in the data. Of course, it's never going to be perfect. But I think people, intuitively understand that that's true and that's okay. But then they also have to be armed with the knowledge to understand why, you're only going to get 90% accuracy or something on that. So.
Also, another thought on reliability. I mean, historically, and the conventional reliability metrics have been vehicle-based. I mean, we're trying to measure on-time performance. At the end of the day, what we are actually catering to is a good user experience. So it's our metrics, although they are vehicle-based, but really our end outcome, really, or target outcome is a good user experience. There has been some shift in some academic efforts have been trying to look at so-called person-based reliability measures, and also looking really more at the entire path of the trip, because reliability is not only, if bus is coming on time or not, but also there is travel time variability, arriving at work on time or not, and so on. So there is really the whole experience. And now with Presto card data or smart card data, we have more ability to really measure or take measurements on individuals themselves, even on repeated instances of time, to be able to measure really their user experience and its stability over time. So I think there's an opportunity, and already some researchers in other parts of the world have looked into that using smart card data to come up with some person-based reliability metrics. That's something I think might present an opportunity for us here in the Golden Horseshoe.
Bill is thumbs up on that. But do you want to add anything, Bill, personally?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the project we did for OC Transpo in Ottawa a couple of years ago is that they wanted to use a data focused approach to identify parts of the network that would most benefit from transit priority. So we combined APC, GTFS, and AVL data and looked at it from timing point to timing point. So we'd look at all trips regardless of route across timing point pairs, and creating an index that looked at passenger load over that link, deviations from scheduled run times, and the variability of run times, like the standard deviation of run times. So put that all together and creating an index, normalize it from 0 to 100, and then mapped all that out by time period direction and whatnot. And it was very useful to quickly zero in on which types or which links would probably benefit most. So really, we were trying to identify those links that had high passenger volumes, high variability in schedule adherence, and high deviations in schedule adherence. So it was quite an interesting exercise putting together those three types of data. And I think it's something that most operators in terms of transit systems would find quite useful in trying to improve their networks.
So it was APC for loads, GTFS for schedule, and then AVL for real time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And why link by link as opposed to stop level?
Stop level running times from stop level to stop or stop to stop are quite short. So you just needed a bit bigger values from going from time point to time point rather than stop to stop.
Yeah, no, quite interesting. Yeah, I think there's a whole area of trying to look at more customer or person-based reliability indicators, like Amber was suggesting. That would be an interesting common exercise.
We wrote a paper a few years ago, and we surveyed the different reliability metrics, both in academia and practice. And I think we've come up with something close to 20 different metrics. Some of them focused on headways, some on time performance, others on travel time, variability, and so on. So there's a wide range of metrics out there.
Well, that might be, but I assume it was an academic paper.
It was an academic paper.
I keep on teasing my academic friends. It would be a good basis for starting a discussion, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be happy to share it with everyone here.
Should we?
I think Anthony has a.
Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
I have one more thought, maybe just something to think about in passing, but we're really interested in any kind of tools we could develop to do short-term demand forecasting on a regional wide transit network. It's really hard to predict demand on a new transit route. The macro model GGHM v4 we have is not fine-grained enough to do some of this work. And so looking at OD pairs, looking at travel patterns and trip purposes, how could we build a tool that supports that? Could be spreadsheet based, but things like Remix, which is an online kind of, I think mostly in the US, you just put 2 dots on a map and it tells you the demand and the potential revenue from those trips. So anything we could do on that short-term forecasting modeling kind of world, that would be really helpful.
So we're talking here sketch planning tools, right? I mean,
yeah,
pretty simple, just using, a simple demand model with socio-demographics of the 2 zones and so forth.
And maybe that's more in the Eric Miller world of things, but just
well,
I don't know where these things fall.
Yeah.
He's focusing a lot more on activity-based models, which are quite more sophisticated.
Yeah, simple things we could run, just like if someone asked, hey, why don't we put a route here? You'd be amazed how many times we get those questions. And we never quite know how to predict the demand.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think there's something in the chat. Sorry.
I think Ben's just commenting on some of the conversation. It's a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Should we, Amber, should I go to the sort of next?
I think so.
Do you want to pursue this a bit more, or?
No, I think a lot of insights have been shared. I think it's quite clear what some common interests and some challenges. I think it's we can proceed with the next topic.
Yep. Okay. So the next deals more with challenges and what other kinds of things besides specific applications or specific research might be pursued. So there's we've got 2 polling questions. So Willem, why don't you bring up the first one again? You have to go to the link that.
Yeah, there'll be a new link here.
A new link. Okay,
yeah,
good.
Just put it in the chat.
Good. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, it takes you to the process. I think we have to do these questions one at a time.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. These are much more simple. They're just you.
Just pick one. Yeah.
You just pick one. So wait a second. Today.
Yeah, looks like people are responding.
So this is just to get, because quality assurance has come up several times today, and cleaning up the data is the very first thing people have to tackle when they get into data analytics. Just thought it'd be useful to get a sense of where people felt they were. Now, this is a biased collection perhaps because it's the people that were most interested that stayed on for the last session, but still, it would be, thought it'd be interesting to see.
I think the results may not surprise you, Brendan.
And we'll bias it more because we'll let the academics and so forth guess. So maybe we shouldn't do that. I don't know. So
I think maybe in slight defense of academics, it is worth mentioning that if you reach out to somebody who's worked on something interesting, they're willing to take the time to even walk you through it or help you make sense of it sometimes. I know that some of the papers and stuff, not setting aside the paywall issue, can be a little inaccessible, but
No, I understand that, but I guess it's an issue of, I wasn't so much talking about that, Willem. It's more that academics who have worked with transit agencies tend to work with ones that are relatively sophisticated and
Yeah.
may have gotten pretty well into the quality assurance program. I know
it's true.
cleaning up the data is still a big issue, but still probably less so with the agencies that academics tend to work with.
True. We do like, very simple solutions.
So, okay, let's see if I can come
All
back.
right, we've
to
got
where
about
I
16
was.
responses.
Okay, let me see now. My computer is slowing down as we add more things on.
All right. I think it's pretty much settled there. So
Okay.
we share the screen here.
Whoa. Oh. Well, that's very interesting, actually. Maybe not surprising, as you said, but still, we have nobody feels they've solved the quality assurance, not yet.
If they did, I think they might be mistaken. It's always a problem, right?
It's always a problem. Yeah. Anyway, that's very interesting. And let's put up the second question, which has to do more with what the source of the challenges are.
Oh, sorry, I may have muted myself there. I changed the same link. I changed the question on you. So if you've got it open in a tab, the poll will have changed, or you may have to just refollow the link, but it's the same one I just put in the chat.
Okay, so yes, no,
Yeah.
I agree with what Blair said. More we always want more. There's always issues. It's no question. So this is, what's your biggest data related challenge? Reliability of the data, lack of analytic tools, lack of data knowledgeable staff, lack of IT support, lack of internal interests, lack of vendor support, lack of information sharing and opportunities with the academics. Yes, it's again, Krista, I know it's hard. I just wanted to get a little bit of a sense. I suspect everybody would like to check off most of them.
Is this just you, Brendan?
I'm sorry?
Oh, there we go.
I'm here. Let me just, so I think Willem, how's it going?
Good. Sorry. We got about 15 responses, it looks like.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, good enough. All right. Share the results. Here we go.
Oh.
Lack of data knowledgeable staff is the number one.
No.
Interesting.
Planners with data skills. Collaboration, internal interest, and analytic tools is kind of tied for a second.
Well, it's more balanced than I perhaps would have thought. recognizing it was a tough question to choose one. The lack of vendor support, that either means that they're doing a fantastic job or everybody's sort of, that's given up and they're doing their own thing.
Everyone here's picked good vendors, I guess.
Oh, yes, that's
the way to interpret that.
True. Of course. Well, all vendors are good, right? So, okay. Well, so I think that suggests that the lack of knowledgeable staff is interesting. That came up first, isn't it, Emmer? Because one of your you want to mention that one of the objectives of the of TAL.
Well, yeah, that's definitely one of the really key objectives, not only within the university that we would like to develop new courses in transit data analytics, but also professional training courses. And I should actually mention, we've been offering two professional development courses for about more than 10 years now. Brendan and I and Nigel Wilson and others as well. But it doesn't really, or it lacks this data analytics component, which is, I think, becoming more critical now. So we are now in the early stages of developing a new data analytics course that will really engage different academics as well as professionals to come up with something that is useful for both our own students at the graduate level as well as professional training in the industry.
One of the, as I've been monitoring this sort of discussion for all these years, one of the things that's sort of been encouraging to me is that in recent years, I'm seeing more positions advertised that are not just straight transit planners, but they're actually for business analysts or data scientists. And so it's a clear recognition of an evolution and of the skill set that people are looking for. It occurs to me that there's an organizational topic that's behind this that would be to identify, to understand a little bit better the relative role of business analysts versus data scientists versus transit planners and what kinds of data skills they might be able to acquire. And to get some consensus so people aren't, I know what happens now is that people just call up a couple of colleagues and cut and paste their job description. So I think there's that, but it also just to clarify the roles. And I know it varies from agency to agency in terms of the respective roles of, you know, service planning versus scheduling versus IT versus operations. But it's, I think there's some collective wisdom that could be gained from sharing more information among transit agencies. But I'd like to open up the floor if anybody's got a sort of comment about any of those, about, you know, trying to find people, or the other issue that's related to that is that these skills, people with data science skills attract a much higher salary. So you're competing, you know, with private corporations that don't have the kinds of limits that public agencies do. I don't know if people have run into that issue or how they see. Bill, yeah, I see you're up.
Yeah, just a comment. I remember reading a quote from a data science book that I like to use, but it said, you know, the most useful type of person to have is somebody who has some data science skills, some statistics skills, but most importantly, subject matter knowledge. So hiring in people with data skills only into transit, that might work over time once you get them trained up in the business of transit. But I think the most effective one is to take some of your planners or schedulers who might have, you know, good skills in numerics and train them up to be better, you know, to improve their skills in data science, because they've already got the substantive knowledge about the transit business, and that's really quite essential. So, you know, when Amir was telling about these courses he's developing for transit professionals to learn some of these data science skills, I think absolutely that's the way to go.
Anthony?
Thanks. No, I think this is a great topic in regards to, you know, what you said is exactly true. Public sector salaries just don't compete. And I think what we've found internally with some of our data analytics teams is we get quite a bit of turnover in the staff. So they'll take a job because they want to get work, but the salary of, you know, an analyst at $68,000 a year, after a few months, they end up getting another job at RBC or, you know, Deloitte or something for twice that. So that's definitely an issue. And the other topic of subject matter expert versus kind of technical data science, I think it's really that combination is so valuable. And you know, it is kind of like a unicorn to find when you get people. You know, I've met a few like Willem I knew from before, and he's just got both of those skill sets. And someone else on the call, Eddie, like he worked for us as a summer intern. He's super specialized in transit, knows every route, every service pattern, and then also has amazing programming skills. And I feel like we really need to encourage, you know, scholarships and things to get those people to stay in the field.
Yeah.
And the one final thought was just in these courses, and I know you're thinking about, you know, after, you know, not just for students, but for maybe career professionals, if you can involve practicing transit planners, like people from the TTC, Go Transit, GRT, if we can participate in the training, I think you might get practical skills that are very tailored to job specific skills when they finish those courses.
Yeah, let me actually clarify really the context within which this course or courses in transit data analytics would be in. There's a new degree called Masters of Analytics in Faculty of Engineering, which is kind of generic. And our intent really, or we were actually requested that we introduce a course on transit data analytics in particular, so that students who would actually take, you know, the Python courses, the statistical analysis courses, and so on, but they would also come to this course and take and apply some of those tools specifically to analyze transit data sets. So, you know, graduates of that program would have both the data science expertise or knowledge, as well as the transit domain knowledges.
That's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear it.
Yeah, but I still feel we'll need to think about this a little bit, because, you know, that's fine for larger agencies that would look for somebody like that. But what Bill was saying about, you know, how do you upscale, you know, a transit planner in a small to medium-sized agency that's got some analytic capabilities, but, you know, you're trying to at least get them to understand the outputs from the data tools, and that I don't know how you do that in a way that's affordable for medium to small agencies. So I don't know. So it's food for thought there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just to add to that.
Sure.
With this potential collaboration route, I think some of the issues that I'm finding is the complexity of transit. So when we talk about a subject matter or business expert, you can move into so many different directions around urban planning, marketing, and there are many more, obviously. And then on the more technical side, you've mentioned programming, but then there are aspects of analysis, thinking about the design of the output and the work to make it accessible to internal users. There's the more geeky type of systems dynamics and feedback loops that might be present in systems that we're analyzing that may be difficult to communicate to others who may not have a background in that. So sort of unpeeling that onion, it gets very complex very quickly. So when I've been trying to, I think, build up some of, or looking at machine learning, say, as a tool to apply within our data, and looking at potential collaboration opportunities, I think that's there've been two pathways that we've been exploring. One is agency and academic cooperation. The other is potentially looking at some of the smaller private sector startups who've worked with the public sector as well, who are looking for, who could be bringing some skills and be quite nimble and a lot cheaper than the larger consultancies. The key thing, though, with both of those approaches is trying to not outsource the wisdom that you're buying in, and trying to sequence in learning around quite a, I think for us, just trying to understand the whole value chain around data scientists, engineers, and the different IT architecture that needs to be set up to handle all of this. You've got a lot of new skills. Maybe there's some complexity added for larger organizations where some of the key stakeholders are more disparate, not necessarily even sitting in the same building. So I just thought I'd just throw that out there as some of my perspective on the question that you're addressing.
Yeah, I think it's going to take some thinking about the different levels and the different levels of scales and the different potential partnerships. There is
one added thought. Sorry, just to be leave on a positive note. I'm just wondering whether there's a role for some of the industry organizations like CUTA or others to help balance needs and mediate amongst different stakeholders, and to achieve a bit more continuity. I think to a point that Emma made earlier on my interpretation on the sort of the point-to-point project work and trying to create more of a longer-term sustainable thinking across different institutions. Maybe there's more of a role that could be had with some of the trade bodies. Sorry, Brendan, to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I've spent my whole life in or around trade associations, so I'm always a big supporter of their involvement. This is perhaps a little bit different, but I think that's a valid point. Amber, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, it just triggered in my mind some of the academic institutions who really have long-term collaboration or collaborative relationship with agencies, through which also there was not only transfer of knowledge, but also transfer of highly qualified personnel who were hired by those agencies and transferred some of the advanced routines and methods and skills they've learned. So MIT is a very well-known institution which really has been working very closely with CTA, with MBTA, and so on those long-term collaborative agreements. And I think many of the students who graduated out of those collaboration initiatives have ended up working in those agencies and have been, I think, pushing the envelope to some extent.
Absolutely. And in fact, during the symposium, we had a whole session with half a dozen different academic institutions that have been doing this and showing different models. I wanted to also, though, come back a little bit to something that triggered in my mind from this discussion and from what Anthony said, is about the retaining of these more qualified staff. There is definitely the salary issue. I mean, I know there's turnover because of that. But transit's a pretty good place. A lot of people are attracted to it because it's not, as I said at the symposium, it's not like working for the banks. You're doing social good. You're helping people that need the help. And a lot of people feel good about themselves because of that. It's also a lot more secure in terms of environment than startups or banks. But I've seen also situations where the lack of support from senior management frustrates people. If the agency is too operations driven and the senior management don't recognize the value of the analytics, young people coming in with more skills would try stuff and it doesn't go anywhere, they don't stay long. And that's an institutional issue for the whole industry that's really challenging. But part of these discussions is to try to get more awareness, find more use cases that convince senior management and policy boards that this is all important. Anthony, I think you raised your hand, but then you dropped it.
Just to give you, I think, no, I agree with what you said. That's all.
Okay.
I had a quick comment, if that's all right, Brendan.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, we talked a little about formal training, and I wonder if there's a place in here for a little bit of an informal training ecosystem. I mean, I think, especially for some of the smaller agencies, you have the same person that has to carry the information from, the raw data all the way through to something that can be interpreted by management and the public, I guess. And I wonder, I mean, a lot of the skills I gained because I was able to, work off of what other people have done and adapt certain situations. And I wonder if there's maybe a place outside of a formal course or a formal training that people should be able to go. We talked about sharing, GitHubs and having collective places that, a lot of this stuff you can pick up and adapt to your own system if you can see and it's well explained. So.
No, I agree. And you mentioned earlier, I thought, an interesting term of sort of ecosystem of, like-minded people that are interested in things. And I think part of our discussion with this workshop and future activities is to really try to stimulate more of a discussion so we get more of that kind of ecosystem that's supportive, and maybe it'll, filter up to higher levels as well. We talked a lot about the training part and skills. Oh, wait a second, there's a chat. I can't quite see it though.
Just confirmation that there's an interest for that kind of thing. So.
Okay, got it. Oh wait, there's something from Vince. There's a problem. Yeah. Vince, do you want to? I think that's a good comment. Do you want to just comment? Open your mic and.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm recovering from heart surgery, so I look kind of rough. That's the reason, but I'm doing well. I'm in a comfortable room here. Yeah, my point is I do a lot of consulting with the smaller transit systems, and Brendan and I go back to APC. How many years ago? Decades?
Yeah, 90. What that report
years?
I showed was 1991. Oh.
Well, I go back before that, and I'm glad to hear all the young people here. Great that I was amazed today, blown away by Boston, MBTA, STM, the other transits where they're using the data to a great purpose, especially with COVID. No, my point is with the smaller systems, there's talented people in those systems. I work with them. When I say small, I mean 50 buses or less. And there's a lot of them in Canada and the US. And they're smart people. It's just that they're firefighting constantly. They wear so many hats. Like one of my clients now, I won't mention her name, but she's a wonderful lady. She tweets service delays herself. She's running the transit system, about 35, 40 bus system. So, your heart's in the right place, but you can only do so much, So what I'd like to give to the U of T, the TAL group and the sharp young PhD and master's candidates, don't ignore the little systems. Try to develop some nice, easy tools. Maybe they can output, they do a one-off every 6 months. They download their farebox data from the smart card system or even APC data, and just give them a little basic 1 week picture of what's going on in their system, because they don't change that much, usually 30 or 60 minute or 20-minute headways. So to Amber and yourself, Brendan, and the other smart people over there, there's a lot, they're struggling, those small guys. And they hire us once in a blue moon, the consultants, we go in, and then we disappear, and that's the end of it. I feel bad about that. They should have an ongoing relationship, and I think it's really lacking in there. And there's good people. They're not stupid, that's for sure. They're overrun. Too many hats. Too much going on every day. Anyway, that's my point.
No, I totally agree. My first job was Indiana University Institute of Urban Transportation that developed handbooks on management performance audits and on transit management. And the whole purpose was to help the small agencies in the Midwest, just basics about planning, operations, maintenance, and marketing. And there's definitely some tools that are needed here to support people that can't invest in the more sophisticated staff and tools. So
in the archives of the John Robarts Library, I'm Toronto born and raised, but I didn't go to that school. I went to a better one. No, just kidding. U of W. And in the archives there, Multi-Systems. Do you remember them, Brendan, the consultant?
Oh, absolutely.
They produced in the 80s beautiful tools and documents. There were no software and there was no iPhone. There was nothing. But these beautiful documents that you could give to a small transit manager, and it's like a menu, and they'd follow it. And it would help them with basic stuff, riding counts, ridership.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing now with some of the nice data tools that we have. But what was that guy's name from Multi-Systems? He was a great consultant.
Well, Nigel was on the board, and so John Antonucci was there. And
John Antonucci. I met him many times.
Yeah.
Super guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to look, Amber, at a good, like a manual system and how you automate it to today's tools, if you dig up those old reports, they're very good to this day.
It's it's a great comment. Thank you, Vince.
I'll let you go now.
Part of our of our vision and scope is to build those sketch planning analytics, or what we call foundational analytics. Very simple analytics, for travel time analysis, for route analysis and design, and very simple ones that and our vision is really to have those available online that could be downloaded for free by transit agencies to really just help them with some basic tasks. So it's really in line with the sentiment of your comments. So that's definitely something really on our radar.
I think it's been a great discussion. I don't know if there's any other topics people want to bring up. We've covered a lot of different things in terms of applications. We focused on the big applications because of the way that first polling question was structured. But you could see from my presentation this morning that there's a world of stuff that people are looking at, and it's all over. It just covers everything, and it's going to be growing. I mean, I think one of my wrap-up comments, which I sort of say, this is just the beginning, because once we start moving into a world of, smart cities with big data coming from all different directions and connected and autonomous vehicles, that'll just increase, exponentially the amount of data. And where the transit industry is just slowly getting up to speed to manage their own data, but they've got to be thinking about the future as well, because it's just going to be growing even more. But I think with that, Amber, I would just, don't see any other hands raised. I think maybe we could, if you want to just concluding some comments, and then.
Yeah, no, actually what strikes me in those conversations always is really the pace at which sometimes academics really try to explore new areas of research that is really sometimes a little bit far removed, I have to admit, far removed from reality. Sometimes, those academic exercises are, quite intriguing, theoretically and academically, but in conversations like this, we are always really brought down to earth to really remind ourselves what the real issues are. So that's something really I really enjoy so much. Those kind of conversations. Because probably I presented a whole slew of projects at the beginning in my opening remarks and introduction to TAL. Some of those topics, admittedly, really might really be very hard really to implement today or in the near future, but they are interesting academic exercises. But also at the same time, we're trying to really have a balance between the two. Because we as academics, we have our role really and mandate to try to push the envelope on like some theoretical directions, but also at the same time, we need to make sure that our work is relevant and can be really utilized and implemented, in real life. So I really hope that we can continue through this forum of TAL, that we continue those discussions and explore ways of bridging this gap and making sure that our work in academia is relevant. I think through those conversations, we've come up over the past few years with some projects of common interest to both industry partners, both on the public sector and the private sector, as well as academia, to really work on things that are of mutual interest and benefit. So I really hope that we continue along those directions and we go down this path. We plan to have further workshops of this sort to continue the discussion and share our experiences and our successes and failures and needs, so that in the end we come up with some formula for really bringing together our efforts collectively. We have in our region here a number of transit agencies of all sizes, the very big, the very small, and everything in between. And all of us are using transit data. So we see ourselves in TAL as really an agent really of collaboration, of probably bringing people together, bringing data together, coming up with a set of tools that could be used by the different transit agencies. So we'll continue this conversation. And I think with this, if anybody would like to make any comments before we conclude this workshop.
I would just like to thank everybody for hanging in till such a long day full of information, and
Yeah.
I think we've had a good conversation. So it's just the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Have a good evening.